Hi, welcome to Garden City Church KL Online. We hope this message equips you and gives you encouragement to live out your faith boldly and practically. If you want to learn more about our church, visit our website at www.gardencitykl.com or click the link in the description below.
Well, good morning to you once again, and welcome to Garden City. My name is Peter, and I am one of the pastors. Whether you are finding your way back after the summer holiday, and this is your first week back, or maybe your job has just moved you here to KL, and then this is your first weekend here at Garden City, I want to say welcome to you. We are so excited that you have chosen to be with us here this morning. Today, we are continuing in a series that we started earlier this year called Search for a King, as we work through the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel, and it's going to take us all the way through Christmas. If you have your Bibles, this morning we're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 24, so I want to invite you to go ahead and turn there, 1 Samuel chapter 24, but if you don't have your Bibles, we will also have it up here on the screen for you as well. And as you're finding your way there, I want to ask you whether you've ever had an opportunity that was so good, it was too good to pass up. Everything on paper looked amazing, but you ended up making that decision only to find out that it was a really terrible decision. Or maybe you found yourself on the opposite side of that, where you waited, even though it seemed like it was a great idea or a great decision, but you waited, you said no, and you're so glad that you did, because it ended up, that situation would have gotten you into a lot of trouble. Usually I hear these kind of stories in two realms of life. The first is with jobs. A lot of people will say, well, I had this new job opportunity. I had this opportunity for a promotion to leave my company and go to another one, and everything on paper looked great. I was going to get a significant salary increase. I was going to have more days for holidays, and so it was too good to be true, and so I jumped on it and I took that job, only to find out that my boss is terrible. This company is terrible. I would give up the extra money. I would give up the extra holiday time if I could just go back to my old job. The other place where I hear these kinds of stories a lot is when it comes to relationships and dating. Now, I'm not trying to say that dating is bad or that no one should do it, not anything like that. But for me, growing up, when I looked at everyone who was dating, my peers, I always thought, this is so silly. Right? Why are elementary school kids dating one another? Right? Why are middle school? What business do even high school students have dating one another? Now, again, this is not me telling you not to date. This was just what just an inside glimpse to the mind of your pastor. And so I always grew up thinking this, but when I was in 5th grade, I was faced with a terrible decision. And that was, do I really believe that or not? Because in 5th grade, I was like 9 or 10 years old, and the prettiest girl in the entire elementary school asked me to be her boyfriend. And so in that moment, I'm like, do I really believe all these things that I've been saying to myself, or am I going to say yes? And I was like, in my mind of a 5th grader, I was like, I think I was more mature beyond my years. I thought, I'm not going to marry this girl. I'm in 5th grade. I barely know her. I barely know myself. I'm only like 9 years old. And so I ended up telling her no. And as I look back on my life here today, if I had said yes to every opportunity, to every person that looked pretty in my life would be a complete disaster. But then I turned 18. I went off to my first year of university, and I met Grace. And I told myself the time for waiting is over. And so this Tuesday is our 19-year wedding anniversary, and we are excited to be celebrating that. Although I do think, especially in our early years of marriage, that there have been lots of times where my wife had wished she had waited. Although I've never had that thought. Again, if you're just joining us, whether for the first time or from holidays, Israel, what we're going to see in 1 Samuel chapter 24, what we've seen in the previous chapters, is that Israel has demanded God for a king. They wanted to be like the rest of the nations. And so God obliges. He said, okay, I will give you a king, and I'm going to give you the kind of king that you would want. And so God anoints Saul as king. And on the outside, he looks like what a king should look like. He's a manly man. He's the person that we would all look at and say, that's the kind of person that we want to be king over us. But the problem is, on the inside, Saul cares more about himself than he does about honoring God. And so God ends up rejecting Saul, and he anoints David as the next king. So David is anointed as the next king, but he doesn't become king right away. Instead, he spends years in the pasture as a shepherd in obscurity. No one knows who he is or even that he's been anointed as king. And then when David is finally summoned to the royal palace where he belongs, he has to flee for his life because the current king Saul wants him dead. And so we find in 1 Samuel chapter 24 that David is on the run for his life. But he's not just running, he's having to wait on God. You see, God chose him to be king. He anointed David to be king, but God's not put him on the throne yet, and it's been years. And everything as we look at David's life could say, David in this moment where we find him in chapter 24 could say, this waiting, this season of being in waiting for God has been really hard. Life has not been good. If you've ever had to wait on God, you know that it can oftentimes be very hard because you don't always know what God is up to. And it's easy to question him and say, does God even care? Does he see me in my suffering? Does he know what he's doing? Is he even working at all? And even after a long season of waiting, God doesn't always do what we think. And so 1 Samuel chapter 24, what we're going to see is what David does in his season of waiting and how we can wait. What do we do in our waiting? How do we wait? Especially when things are hard or not how we thought they should be. 1 Samuel chapter 24, starting in verse 1. It says, when Samuel returned from following the Philistines, he was told, behold, David is in the wilderness of En-Gedi. And then Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel and went to seek David and his men in front of the wild goats' rocks. And he came to the sheepfolds by the way, and there was a cave. And Saul went in to relieve himself. The Hebrew there literally says that he covered his feet. So he drops his pants because he's got to use the toilet. That's what this is saying. I bet a lot of you didn't know that was in the Bible. You got to love this story. There's a lot of great details to come. So Saul's got to take care of business. He's got to use the toilet. And the story gets even better. It just so happens that, continue with me in the story, David and his men were sitting in the innermost parts of that cave. Okay, let me translate that for you. Okay, imagine with me, the modern day equivalent of that is like if you walked into the elevator. Okay, you're in this enclosed, entrapped area. There's no air circulation, and someone decides to pass gas. That's kind of like what happens here, right? You're stuck. Anyone ever been in that situation before? I think a lot of us have. Anyone ever been the perpetrator? Like you're the one who did that? Anyone brave enough to admit? It's probably all the ones who are laughing. Right, you're the ones who did that. But don't be that person. All right, now everyone, as the parents go up to the 7th floor to pick up their kids, are going to look at each other suspiciously. All right, you're welcome for that. But what do we do? Okay, the sovereignty of God is really funny here, isn't it? Out of all the caves that David and his men could have chosen to hide, this is the one that Saul chooses to use the toilet, but it wasn't random at all. God was orchestrating all this. Continue with me in verse 4. And the men of David said to him, here is the day of which the Lord said to you, behold, I will give your enemy into your hand, and you shall do to him as it shall seem good to you. You see, Saul is as vulnerable as a man can be in this moment. And David's men say, this is your chance. This is the moment. This is the breakthrough that we've been waiting for. The guy who's chasing after us, the one who's trying to put us to death, there's never going to be a better opportunity to this. We have to take advantage of it. Then David arose and stealthily cut off a corner of Saul's robe. And after David's heart struck him, because he had cut off a corner of Saul's robe, he said to his men, the Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, to put out my hand against him, seeing that he is the Lord's anointed. So David persuaded his men with these words and did not permit them to attack Saul. And Saul rose up and left the cave and went on his way. So the rest of our time together, as we continue to make our way through this story, I want to point out and I want to show you what it looks like to wait on God. Here's the first thing. Waiting on God requires intimacy with God. Waiting on God requires intimacy with God, intimacy with His Word, His will, and His ways. Let me ask you this. Why is David so struck? Why is he so convicted that he tore off a piece of Saul's robe? It was just the corner, and Saul probably wouldn't have ever thought anything about it. But you see, for David, reverence for God's anointed one, the one that God had chosen to be king over his people, David had this honor for him. He had a reverence for him, even if God's Spirit had already left Saul, because as he was dishonoring the Lord's anointed one, David knew that he was dishonoring God. You see, David had this intimacy with God that led him to have conviction over his sin and wrongdoing. See, when you retaliate against someone, maybe it's just a jab, maybe it's just a few words that you say in attack towards that person, do you ever immediately feel convicted that you've dishonored another image bearer of God? You see, if you don't know God through His Word, where He reveals His ways and His wills to us, then you will never wait on God. Why would you? Why would you wait on God to act on your behalf if you don't know God and what His character is like and what He does? You instead will always do what you think is right in your own eyes. If you don't know God, you're going to always take matters into your own hands because you don't know any better. You don't know God. You don't know His ways. You don't know what His will is. But if you truly know God, if you have intimacy with Him, you abide with Him, then in that season, in those times of intimacy and abiding with God, you become like Him. You begin to think and act like Him. You begin to love and value the things, and your heart looks like and becomes more like God. And then that intimacy leads you to understand that waiting on God is the best thing that you can do. You don't have to take care of business yourself because God always is on time. He never makes mistakes. As one Christian artist would say, you could search the world until your head hurts just to find out His way is better. Shout out to Forrest Frank if you know that song. All right, see, there is no better place that you can go to familiarize yourself with God, to find intimacy with God so you begin to know Him and what He's like and what He does, and then to love and trust Him, then His Word. And as you grow in intimacy with Him, as you familiarize yourself with God's words, then that leads you to be in tune and in alignment with God so that you can wait on Him. You see, waiting on God requires intimacy with Him. Number 2, waiting on God demands that you surrender your own ways. Waiting on God requires that you surrender your own ways. You have to give up control of your life and surrender to the one who is truly in control. A couple of weeks ago, I gave you an example of how little control that we have in our lives. And I gave that example by saying we can't always choose which restaurant we're going to eat at for lunch. Right? And afterwards, someone came up and told me, hey, maybe you shouldn't name the restaurant by name because if they somehow ever hear this, they may come back and sue you. Okay, so imagine you're at a restaurant not named Chili's. Right? I found myself in this situation a lot. I want to go to a restaurant and I'll go there on purpose because I already know what I want to have for lunch. Right? I have to determine. I can control that much, right? And so I'll go to a restaurant not named Chili's that has all-you-can-eat chips and salsa. And oftentimes what I find, maybe about half the times when I go to these restaurants, I will already know, and I'm going to put my order in, and the person who's taking the order will say the dreadful words. They'll say, "I'm sorry, sir. Finished already." And I'm like, what? I didn't have to wait in queue. I got to sit down at the restaurant that I wanted. I already know what I want to eat, and they'll tell me, "I'm sorry, sir, finished already." You see, the idea of control that we have is just a complete illusion. So go back to David with me. David is chosen by God and is anointed by God to be king. So he could have interpreted the circumstances of Saul being in this cave in front of him and said, well, this must be God's will. This is within my control. What else could it mean? That God has put Saul here right in front of me. It's too easy. It'd be foolish not to take advantage of this. But David doesn't take things into his own hands. He sticks to what he knows honors God. In other words, David doesn't let the circumstances in front of him determine his actions. David doesn't let what is in front of him determine who he is or even what the will of God is. My pastor back home, he says, it is easy, Pastor JD, he would say, it's easy to confuse our desires, what our heart wants, what our will is with the will of God. It's hard sometimes to distinguish those. It's easy to confuse circumstances, what is in front of us, with the will of God. And so oftentimes what we will do and say, well, these are incredible. These are extraordinary coincidences. Like, this must be from God. What are the chances? Right? That's how we determine the will of God. Oh, this feels right, so it must be right. And so I'll often talk to people who are single, who are praying for a spouse to come into their life. And as they are praying and as they're patiently waiting, an attractive non-believer walks into the room. And oftentimes they think, well, I prayed for a spouse, and this nice non-believer walked into the room. Maybe that is God answering my prayers. Even the scripture has made it clear that you shouldn't marry a non-believer. Sometimes people will say, well, I've had all these problems in my marriage, and I was just out and about minding my own business. I just happened to meet someone that takes interest in me. Maybe God has given me a sign that I should leave my spouse and start to date this person. No, that's not a sign from God. Maybe a little bit more lighthearted example is you've been looking at something that you desired. You're like, I want to buy this thing. I really love it, and I just need the right opportunity to come up. And as you're browsing through your phone, what do you know? That thing has gone on sale. And you're like, praise God. He sees me where I'm at. He's lowered the price. It must be a sign from God to buy that. No, that's just your phone spying on you. And it'll tell you, limited stock, act now, buy it now. You're like, okay, yes, Lord, I'm going to do that. No, that's not how we determine God's will. See, God's will is never determined just by circumstances, no matter how crazy they may seem, or by our feelings. Because God can sometimes use circumstances, but other times, circumstances are just that. They're simply just circumstances. And our feelings are terribly unreliable. They're a terrible guide for us. There have been so many things in my life where I thought, oh, this is a great idea. I'm going to do this. I'm going to buy this. I'm going to go there. And I slept it off. And I'm like, what was I thinking? That was a terrible idea. You see, not every opportunity that looks good or is promising is from God. Not every opportunity that looks good or promising is from God. And the greatest example of this in all of Scripture is found in Genesis 3. God creates Adam and Eve, and he puts them in the garden. Everything is good. Nothing is broken. Everything is perfect. There's nothing that Adam and Eve are missing, and God provides so abundantly for them. But God tells them, you can eat of all the fruit of all the trees except for this one. And then Satan comes into the picture and tempts Adam and Eve with the fruit from that tree. And he says, did God really say you're going to die? No, you're not going to die. If you eat this fruit, then you're going to be like God. Doesn't that sound like an incredible proposition? Like, who wouldn't want to be more like God? It sounds like a great idea. But as they take a bite of that fruit, they recognize that they have made a terrible mistake. Something that looks so good, that looks so promising, would lead to their death. A couple of weeks ago in our students' Bible study, we started from Genesis 1 and we started reading God's Word. And one of the foundational ideas that Genesis 1 teaches us as God creates and he declares that everything is good is that God is the only one who can determine what is good and what is not good, not us. You see, God's will is never allows us to do things that are contrary to his good ways. What that means is you can't do the will of God. You can't honor God while breaking the commands of God. And you can never accomplish the will of God by the power of your own flesh. That's what David recognizes here. He recognizes, yes, God is the one who anointed me, but that kingship is not something that I can take by force and make happen by myself. And I can make happen by doing things my own way. See, you can't justify, you can't rationalize your fleshly actions and the means, no matter how good the end may seem. Now, before we move on, I want to take a quick note of this. You see, David is with his men, his friends, they're good friends. They're running with David and hiding in these caves with him. They're in the trenches with him. But even good friends can give you bad advice. Even good friends who are well-intentioned can give you bad advice. David's men here, you can note that they quote a promise of God. He said, David, remember when God says he's going to deliver your enemy into your hands? You could do whatever seems good to you. Right? They're quoting God's promise to David, but they misapply it. You see, your friends and their counsel are only as good as they know the Word of God, and they know God, and also have the wisdom to skillfully and precisely and accurately apply it to you. Did you follow that? They have to know God, but they also have to know how to precisely and accurately and skillfully apply it to you. I don't know about you, but there have been a couple times in my life where it's just been a hard season. Things have been really tough. And some well-intentioned people took the whole Bible and they just whacked me over the head with it. And I'm like, man, I appreciate that your heart was good, you're well-intentioned, but I didn't need you to use the Bible as a sledgehammer. I needed you to be more precise with this one word from God and skillfully apply it to my life. And those are the kinds of friends that we need in our lives who can do both of those things. You see, every major decision in my life, and even the small ones, I always consult with good counsel. People who I know who will not just agree with everything I say, because I need people in my life who love me enough to tell me the truth in love. And so, for example, when my family was trying to discern whether God was moving us here to KL to come to this church, I asked lots of people, my boss and my friends, everyone, and for whatever reason, everyone was so excited about us moving to KL. It made me wonder, everyone's too excited. Like, should I be offended that they're excited that we're leaving? But I asked all of these people because I wanted them to speak God's counsel into my life, because God often speaks through the counsel of others. But you must always take that counsel like David does and inquire of God as well. Take that counsel and then you have to go back around to God. That's what we often see David doing early in his life. He listens to counsel, but he also inquires of God. He goes to God and says, God, what do I do? What do you want? Whatever you tell me, that's what I'm going to do. And when he stops asking God these things and he starts acting out of his own will in his own ways, that's when he gets into trouble. In a few chapters, we're going to get there. But look with me, pick back up with me in verse 8. Afterward, David also arose and went out of the cave and called after Saul, my lord the king. And Saul looked behind him. David bowed with his face to the earth and paid homage. And David said to Saul, why do you listen to the words of men who say, behold, David seeks your harm? Behold, this day your eyes have seen how the Lord gave you today into my hand in the cave. And some told me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not put out my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. See, my father, see the corner of your robe in my hand. For by the fact that I cut off the corner of your robe and did not kill you, you may know and see that there is no wrong or treason in my hands. I have not sinned against you, though you hunt my life to take it. May the Lord judge between me and you. May the Lord avenge me against you, but my hand shall not be against you. As the Proverbs of the ancient says, out of the wicked comes wickedness, but my hand shall not be against you. After whom has the king of Israel come out? After whom do you pursue? After a dead dog, after a flea. May the Lord therefore be judge and give sentence between me and you, and see to it and plead my cause and deliver me from your hand. Number 3, waiting on God calls for hope. Waiting on God calls for hope. You don't have to take things into your own hands because you have the hopeful expectation that God is going to work, that he is going to take action on your behalf, no matter how bad the situation or how things look. Now, if you think about David, wouldn't it have been better for everyone, for the nation of Israel, to just get rid of Saul? Right? He's selfish. He's paranoid. He's a terrible king. I don't know about you, but I love action movies. And oftentimes in the middle of an action movie, there will be a scene where the good guy has an opportunity to take out the villain. But oftentimes he doesn't. And you always knows what's going to happen. If you let the villain go, not at the end of the movie, but at the middle of the movie, you know that bad guy is coming back. And so I find myself talking to myself, to that protagonist. I tell him, don't let him go. Don't show him mercy because he's going to come back to try to get you. And that's the situation that David is in, right? But he understands and he recognizes that it is a compromise to his character. It's a compromise to his character to make compromised decisions in the present because of fears in the future. He doesn't want to compromise his integrity in his character because of something that may happen later on. So he doesn't want to make compromised decisions. We do that a lot, don't we? We say, I can't do this now because that might happen in the future. We think, I can't give generously of my money now to the mission of God because I may have a need for it later. We think, I can't serve and live my life and follow God in the church because I need to invest that time into my education. I need to put that extra time into my career so that I can get ahead. That's what everybody else in the world is doing. And so I have to do that too to keep up with them so that I can have the life that I want later. But even if you do all of those things, there is no guarantee that everything is going to be great in your life. You see, the grace of God alone is your only hope in this life. And you can hope in the present right now that He's going to take care of things in the future. You see, those things that you worry about right now, about whether God is going to get it right or wrong, those are your idols. Those are your kings that you serve. Whatever you worry about, if God is going to get things right or not, that's your idol. And the idols have a way of promising you hope and joy and peace and all of these things and never delivering because they always want you to be their slave. They want to control and rule over you so that you don't have hope now for what God is going to do in the future. And it tempts you to take matters into your own hands right now. See, in this dialogue, David quotes an old proverb. He says, out of the wicked comes wickedness. Out of the wicked comes wickedness, and the opposite is also true. Out of the righteous comes righteousness. And so I want to ask you the question, when you're in seasons of waiting, when you've been hurt or wronged, when you're disappointed or angry, when God's taken too long to do whatever you're asking Him to do, what comes out of you? You see, our hearts are like a cup that is filled with either wickedness or righteousness. And when something like a season of waiting or hardship or someone has wronged us, that cup is knocked over. And whatever is inside of our hearts, that's what comes out. And it's revealed. Now, the circumstances, the situation, the people that wronged you didn't create what's in your heart. They didn't create that reaction in you. Rather, the circumstances, the situation, and the person presented you with the opportunity to spill out and to reveal what was already in your heart. See, out of the wicked comes wickedness. Out of the righteous comes righteousness. You see, for David, he knows that it is better to be innocent and free of sin and suffer injustice for it than it is to sin and to feel like you're coming out on top. Wickedness and sin are bad. They always lead to disaster, no matter how opportune or good it feels in the moment. That's what having hope is while waiting on God. It's not what I can do for myself. It's not the works that I can do and what I have control over, but instead it's recognizing that God is my only hope. I have hope in Him and what He has promised because He will accomplish, He will deliver, He will avenge, He will judge, He will provide. And that's the hope that David has. And it's why that he can talk about himself in this way. With incredible humility, he says, I am just a dead dog. I am a flea. Those are words coming out not of a commoner, but from the anointed king. Is that how you see yourself? You see, when you're wronged, and someone has wronged you, if you think you are somebody, if you are full of self-righteousness, then you will always seek vengeance for yourself. You will take matters into your own hands. You won't be able to forgive them. But if, like David, you're humble, then you recognize that God has been loving and gracious and merciful to me, and I can hope in God to work on my behalf. I don't have to do it myself, and I can love and forgive others freely because that's what God has done for me. Let's keep going. Verse 16. As soon as David had finished speaking these words to Saul, Saul said, Is this your voice, my son David? And Saul lifted up his voice and wept. And he said to David, "You are more righteous than I, for you have repaid me good where I have repaid you evil. And you have declared this day how you have dealt with me. And in that you did not kill me when the Lord put me into your hands. For if a man finds his enemy, will he let him go away safe? So may the Lord reward you with good for what you have done to me this day. And now behold, I know that you shall surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel shall be established in your hand. Swear to me, therefore, by the Lord, that you will not cut off my offspring after me, and that you will not destroy my name out of my father's house." And David swore this to Saul. Then Saul went home, but David and his men went up to the stronghold. Lastly, number 4, waiting on God trusts and rests in his loving faithfulness. Waiting on God, trust and rest in his loving faithfulness. Think about what Saul is asking David to do. He said, don't cut off my offspring. Don't kill off my children. The princes, the ones who biologically have the claim to the throne. The ones who could rise up one day against David to take back what they think is rightfully theirs. But David says, he says, I'm not going to repay evil for evil. Instead, I'm going to repay you with good. You see, it is always better to repay someone with good. That is always the right decision. Saul didn't deserve that. It's not a matter of whether the person deserves it or not. But one of the things that happens, what we see with Saul here, is when you repay with good, even though they are evil towards you, is that it leads the wrongdoer to come to their senses. Saul, in this moment, is like, you've been so good and gracious to me, even though I've been evil towards you. Proverbs 15:1, I love this. A soft answer turns away wrath. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. You see, it's always better to overcome evil with good. But David doesn't just pretend like nothing happened. David is not a fool. He doesn't just go back with Saul. They go their own separate ways, and that's okay. But David, because of this decision, because of this commitment to not harm Saul and his offspring, David would continue to flee for his life. He would continue to run for his life. Why would he do that? It would have been so much easier to just end things with Saul and his lineage and assume his rightful place on the throne as God's anointed king. No more running, no more hiding in caves and begging for help. Yet David is willing to put himself in a compromised, vulnerable position now because he trusts God with his life in the future. See, personal vengeance, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, is so tempting. But vengeance is not always a bad thing. It can be good. God says he's going to have his vengeance. He's not going to, and he cannot leave sin and unrighteousness unpunished. But the one who trusts in the Lord waits for the Lord to deliver. He trusts in the Lord and his steadfast love and faithfulness to fight for them. And so you don't have to take things into our own hands. In fact, that is oftentimes the worst thing that we can do. To get ahead of God, we always get ourselves into a mess when we do that, when we take matters into our own hands. You see, in this chapter, in 1 Samuel chapter 24, it would have been incredibly easy for David to complain to God about his terrible position. God, why am I having to run for my life? You want me to be king. Why don't you take care of me? It would have been easy for him to question God, to be angry at God, and to say, God, I'm done waiting. I've already waited in the pasture. I'm done waiting for you to come and deliver me. I'm tired of running for my life. But in the middle of this, of 1 Samuel chapter 24, we have an incredible psalm that was written during this time, where it reveals more of David's heart. Look at Psalm 57. Psalm 57 says, this is a miktam of David. This is a psalm that David wrote when he fled from Saul in the cave. Now, I'm not sure if Saul was taking his sweet time using the toilet. He is a guy, he's probably scrolling on his phone, and so David just had a lot of time and he wrote this psalm. Or if it was just maybe around this time. But look at David in this time where he's fleeing for his life. Look at the song that he writes. He says, be merciful to me, O God. Be merciful to me. For in you my soul takes refuge. In the shadow of your wings I will take refuge till the storms of destruction pass by. I cry out to God Most High, to God who fulfills his purpose for me. He will send from heaven and save me. He will put to shame him who tramples on me. God will send out his steadfast love and his faithfulness. My soul is in the midst of lions. I lie down amid fiery beasts. The children of man, whose teeth are spears and arrows, whose tongues are sharp swords. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. They set a net for my steps. My soul was bowed down. They dug a pit in my way, but they have fallen into it themselves. My heart is steadfast, O God. My heart is steadfast. I will sing and make melody. Awake, my glory. Awake, O harp and lyre. I will awake the dawn. I will give thanks to you, O Lord, among the peoples. I will sing praises to you among the nations. For your steadfast love is great to the heavens, your faithfulness to the clouds. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. Psalm 57, in the midst of David fleeing for his life in the cave, what do we see here in this psalm? We see that David has intimacy with God. He's hiding. He's taken refuge. His soul takes refuge in God, in God's presence. David is surrendered to him. In this moment where he is fleeing for his life and he's praying for deliverance, that's not at the forefront of his mind. In fact, as you read through the psalm, you're like, are these actually related? Because it seems like David here is more concerned about the glory of God than he is his deliverance. He's not just praying for relief. He's worshiping God during this time. We see hope and confidence. David has confidence and hope that God will fulfill his promises, that God is going to deliver him. He's going to give him salvation. And you see trust. You see David trusting in God's love and faithfulness, so much so that he's writing about his love and faithfulness in the midst of trouble. You see, waiting on God is one of the most important disciplines that we can have as Christians. Maybe the most important, waiting on him. Because in those times of waiting, we find intimacy with God. And if you want a life, you want a spiritual life that flourishes, that thrives, it is often found in the seasons and times of waiting. That is the fruit. That's what comes out. If you're around my age, you probably sat through, and you grew up in America. I'm not sure if they did it in other places. There was a famous study that a university did where they sat children in a room, and they would put one marshmallow, or in my school, they put a piece of candy in front of you, and the person would say, if you can wait and not eat that piece of candy right now, and you can wait 5 minutes, then in 5 minutes, I will give you 5 additional pieces of candy. It sounds like a great deal. The problem for me is I didn't understand English at that time. So I was just like, there's a piece of candy. I took my shot. I was going to lose that opportunity. 5 minutes later, all these other kids got candy, and I looked like a fool. I didn't know what was going on. But what they found in this study is that those children who had the self-discipline and ability to wait and delay gratification, that was often an indicator, a sign that they were going to have success later in life, because they didn't just jump at every opportunity. They were able to wait. But that was only the first part of that experiment. Later on, as they followed up, what they recognized was that it's not always just about the child, but it is also how trustworthy is the person who made that deal and gave that opportunity to the kids. Because even if the child had great patience, if the person on the other side who made this promise was someone who couldn't be trusted, then they were less likely to wait. But if it was someone that they could confide in, they could trust, whatever they say, I believe, then they're much more likely to wait. How much more so is that for us? We don't have to have the incredible ability and incredible faith to wait on God. All we need to do is look on him, to think on his character and what he's done for us, and that gives us the ability to wait. You see, waiting on God is not just some passive thing that we do. We just lay on the couch and do nothing. No. It's clinging to the goodness of God, reminding us, being in his word, of his love and his faithfulness and his promises to us, being in his presence, so we understand that we can have the faith to wait because it's not on us and it's on God, because God himself is not passive. Think about all the names and the ways that God is described in the Bible. Here's a few of them. It says that God is the creator. He's a protector. He's a provider. He's a healer. He's our helper. He's a father. He's a shepherd. He's righteousness. He's peace. He's hope. He's joy. He's a redeemer. He's our refuge. He's a light. He's a rock. He's a strength. He's our savior. All of these names and characteristics have real actions tied to them. God is not just sitting around doing nothing, but he is actively working on your behalf. You see, there is nothing that you need that he is not. So you can wait and you can put your hope and your trust in him. Let me begin to wrap this up. You see, we were the ones, you and I, we are the ones who wrongly took over God's throne. We'd rejected God from being king over us. We said, God, we don't want you on the throne of our lives anymore. We want to be king. We want to rule our own lives. We want to do what seems right in our own eyes. We thought we would do a better job than God, but it didn't lead to life. Instead, it led to our death. And so God would have been just to punish us with death, but because of his great love, he made a way to show us mercy, to give us grace, and to spare our lives, to let us go free. But to do that, it would cost him his own son, Jesus. See, Jesus didn't take things into his own hands. He didn't make his own way, his own plans, and do his own will. Instead, he entrusted and submitted himself to the Father's plans. And so he took on flesh. He became one of us, and he died the death we deserve on the cross. And in that moment, God's perfect righteousness and justice for our sin was fully put on his son, Jesus. You see, we need to recognize, you and I need to recognize that it was our sin. It was your sin. It was my sin that put the rightful King Jesus to death. But by overcoming the grave, Jesus freed us from the power of sin and death and saved us to himself so that there's nothing left for us to do. You see, Jesus has already won it all for us. He fought the battle that we could not win. He overthrew our greatest enemy through his humility that would lead him to the cross. And he would rise again from the dead in victory to rescue you and to raise us up as co-heirs with Christ. So now, even if you're in a season of waiting and you can't see and you can't make sense of what God is doing, you can't feel it, even if the timing of God feels completely off, you can wait, hoping and trusting in the God of your salvation who loves you and is faithful to you. If you're here this morning and you're not a follower of Jesus, you've never put your faith in him, I want to let you know that there is no peace, there is no joy, there is no fulfillment in a life that has lived your own way. To live by the power of your own hands apart from God. You could try all you want to be good and to do good and to try to save yourself, but it will all be in vain. But the gospel, God tells you that Jesus has already done everything necessary to save you. And he's been waiting for you to put your trust in him.